Hey there, Vernacular Faithful. Redcoat here. I'm the representative of Vernacular Games, an indie game company that started back in, at least according to our legal documents, we started in 2016. We started a little earlier than that, but that's when the company was officially reborn, so to speak. Reborn the monster. We've made two games so far. The first was Highway to the Moon, a scrolling shoot 'em up with omnidirectional aiming. Think Spy Hunter meets Ikaruga with a little bit of Devil May Cry in there, uh, and some Borderlands. I know that seems like a very interesting little thing, but I'm kind of advertising it a little bit. Anyway, it's on Steam for 99 cents. You can definitely try it out. We're actually going to be working on a remake of that game. I'm hoping we can get it out by the end of the year, but you never know with dev. I try to take the Nintendo approach on things where it's done when it's done. Anyway, our other title was Legends of Mathematica Squared Under the Shadow of Certainty, an RPG in the classical space with an active time battle system and puzzle dungeons galore. It's a punny game with a lot of math jokes and other stuff around in there, and I would say it's pretty fun. I mean, I enjoy it. It's pretty difficult, but it's fun. Um, we've also made a storybook. We were working in tandem with the group Inertia and formed a smaller group called Whimsitale to actually release a book called The Fairy and the Dragon, which is available on BookBaby. You can also find it on Amazon. It's just a lot harder to look it up because the title just gets buried because there's so many fairy and dragon things. But yeah, if you look it up on BookBaby, you should be able to find it. Just The Fairy and the Dragon by um, oh, 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 that name is escaping me because I know him as a different name. Jeffrey Morgan by Jeffrey Morgan. Now, with all of that said, what am I going to say today? Well, I haven't been speaking for a while, but I've been observing some stuff in the LinkedIn space and in general in the industry. Thank God for Bellular News and the Jimquisition and Yongye, amongst a few other game reporters. I appreciate them keeping track of what's been going on in the industry. But the fact of the matter is, the industry has been hemorrhaging talent. They've been doing layoffs left and right to increase profitability, and at the same time, the hemorrhaging of talent is showing in the designs of their games, where it's very much more about the cash grabs, the how would I put it? Turning the game into a one-armed bandit. And we see these monetization models all over the place where it's really trying to turn your players into payers, as the seminar goes. And I would highly recommend you look that up. It'll illuminate a few things about why you're so addicted to that mobile title you've got in your hands probably right now. Do you have it in your hands right now? Are you playing Subway Surfer at the moment? God have mercy on your soul. Anyway, I digress. I'm just teasing a little bit. But the fact of the matter is, our designs in the AAA space have definitely started getting away from, well, not started, they've been drifting away from design for design's sake and more towards design for monetary sake, where the real focus isn't necessarily on making something like really cool and fun and beautiful, but rather on making something that just makes money. And let's be sure, it is a business, so you need to make the money, but in the ideal sense, the idea would be that you're making a quality product that your audience really wants, rather than making a semi okay product that your audience is compelled to want. And like I said again, watched a few seminars on how to make an addicting game, and not in the sense of a good design, but specifically in the sense of getting people to continually drop their dollars on the thing. It's actually kind of wild how manipulative you can be with that stuff. Anyway, that's rampant in the AAA space, but that combined with the hemorrhaging of talent, where some people are leaving because they're disenfranchised with their approaches, and other people are just simply just getting cut out because it turns out the job that they had wasn't really considered necessary to the group, or at least it was decided that it was unnecessary. It makes for a very interesting environment where now we have this huge pool of really, really experienced devs that the AAAs can select from, and they can pick and choose and grab whoever they want, and they can set their requirements such that 2 years is entry level. And I remember for a period of time I was starting to see like 5 years for entry level. I was like, what is going on? Like I feel like they've gotten past that particular fever dream, and we're back to at least something kind of reasonable. But the fact of the matter is, when you're on LinkedIn and you see a thing that says, we're running a company where entry level is entry level, that shouldn't be a thing you have to say. But I digress. If you look at this as a pure obstacle, it's really bleak. In my opinion, you want to approach things, the way to approach life such that you don't just spiral into despair and become a doomer, as the is now, like, I think the meme's gone away a long time ago, but I think it's still relevant. You need to look at those obstacles as opportunities, and I know that's really tough to do, but in this case, what you see there is 2 needs. 1, games that actually have heart. The people who actually care about the industry want to see those games. And I'm not talking about the casuals that are normally catered to with the more cash grabby games that just kind of waste a little bit of time and titillate the monkey brain, as they say, and get you to keep putting coins into the slot machine. But I'm talking about the people who are fans of the genre. Kind of like making movies for moviegoers. You want to make games for gamers. Now that means that your audience is smaller. So you're not going to make a couple $1 trillion off of fully monetizing your audience. Big whoop, I say. You just need to make enough to live. So instead of trying to make something AAA that requires, like a couple $1 billion to actually make it happen, and then you've got to have a profit margin of a couple $1 trillion to actually make a profit, do kind of like what Ryan Reynolds did with Deadpool, which I think he was working on that for like several years before he even got that thing released. It's crazy. Where he made a product on a shoestring budget. For movies, mind you. I think it was like, I want to say he might have broken the $500,000 mark, maybe a little bit less. I remember it was a lot less than what most Marvel movies were made for. And you can kind of tell by the way it was made. But with the heart that he had into it, his understanding of the character, he actually made something that drew audiences. And he also met a niche that was unfulfilled, which was specifically a well-made R-rated superhero film. Like, up until that point, the only other one that I could think of was Blade. Way back before we had any MCU or any concept of it, which is kind of interesting that it's coming full circle now, where at least in the user-made mods for Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, they're about to make a Blade mod. I think people have been asking for that character to be in that game for quite some time, and I'm guessing it's because there's a little bit of overlap when you've got another dude who does swords and guns and everything, but I'm sure they can figure something out. I'm looking forward to seeing what the community does there. But I digress. Making something on the cheap so that you don't have to have a huge amount of profit to get your return. And a part of this is enabled by the fact that there's a bunch of different niches that you can cater to in the gaming industry that, at least in the AAA space, aren't necessarily being answered. Now, the next thing is you need to actually look at what's being done in the indie space. And you're going to have to answer the hard question of, okay, am I the guy that's going to make the next Metroidvania that's going to be the media darling? Or do I need to lean into a niche that is far less serviced? I mean, I'll be honest, the thing that I see the most in the industry right now, in the indie space right now, is survival games, cozy games, like Stardew Valley clones and the like, and survival games, cozy games, and something that escapes my mind. What was that? What was that one? Survival games, cozy games, and Metroidvanias. Also roguelikes. But if you want to be successful, you want to maybe think back to the games that you liked and be like, well, I don't see that around. Now, granted, I'm a bit older. I'm from an older generation, so I've been exposed to a lot of stuff on the SNES era. But the nice thing about this time, and I won't dig too far into it, but let's just say the Pirates have won. You look in the right spaces, you'll be able to play whatever it is you want for whatever price you want. I will leave it at that. So if you need to do some research on what's really cool and what's interesting, what's been done, and what hasn't had something done as a spiritual successor to it, I would suggest maybe looking down that route. Anyway, the point is, you need to find a niche that is underserviced and then appeal to them. Build a game that is for them, but also for you. Does something a little bit different, a little bit unique within the space, so that when you're out there, later on other people add to the niche, there's still a reason for people to come back to your game. And go from there. I think I don't remember the full name of it. It's like 2 Steps to Eden or something like that. It was a Battle Network clone, essentially, with 4 squares, with 4x4 battle spaces instead of 3x3. And you see, this was catering to a niche that really there was only one franchise that did it. It was, you guessed it, Mega Man Battle Network. They answered the call, and they made a game that was really fun. I mean, it was a roguelike, and it was missing some of the stuff that people wanted out of Battle Network, but they made their own thing. And what that means is that, when we look back, if that type of game produces its own genre and we start seeing more entries into that style of title, 2 Steps to Eden will have its particular niche that it fills of the roguelike version of this. And, it's not just Battle Network minus, which I almost feel like the designers of that game probably had that in mind. because I think to a friend of mine who was like, well, I want to make a Donkey Kong Country style game, and my answer to them is, okay, why would I play your game instead of Donkey Kong Country? You need to answer that question if you're going to go into any particular niche where you're inspired by something. And let's be clear, the answer could just be that I want more of that kind of experience because there's not enough of it out there. That's why I would play your game and play Donkey Kong Country. I believe that this is a little bit of the approach why Whisker Force, if I'm remembering that name correctly, they've got, it's basically doing something in the classical Star Fox realm, in part because we just don't get that many games in that space. And I think there's a number of other groups that are actually kind of leaning into that niche. Following with that idea, there's another thing that kind of comes with trying to build a game to appeal to a niche audience, is you do want to consider your saturation thing. And like I said before, you got to answer that question, are we the guys? Are we going to be the ones who make Oni? Are we going to be the ones that make Dark Souls 2D clone number 75, which is the one that actually makes sense? Are we going to make Sultan Sanctuary? Are we going to make something that is actually memorable? Are we going to make Guacamelee? Are you confident enough in your design that you're going to hit it? Because if you don't have that, then the next thing would be find an underserviced space and just make something to service them. This could be something like, say, Lethal League, which is kind of its own thing. You could make a game that is in the Lethal League vein and does something slightly different that follows up, and so now people who really like Lethal League have a second game in that space to play. And also considering that Lethal League 2 has been out for so very, 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 very long, having another game that people can look at and it's like, oh, hey, this is new. It does the same kind of cool thing, but it's a little bit unique. I mean, that is a strategy. One of the other things that I should mention with regards to this, so I mentioned the preponderance of Metroidvanias, and there's a reason why that's the case, because let's be real, most game engines that are open for the public to work with, that's one of the easiest things to get started with making, because theoretically, if you do it right, you don't even necessarily need to do menu transitions or things like that. I mean, you can just kind of pop up things on the main screen, so you don't have to do any fancy going from screen to screen stuff. And that's why that's there, why we see so many of those. So one of the other things to think about, and this is more from a businessman's perspective, is what can I make that's difficult to implement? What can I make that is a little bit harder for people to put together? Which means I'm going to be in less, frankly, less of a hyper-competitive space. Now, I mean, this is something like with the Battle Network clone game. Like, that's a little bit off kilter when you look at what is normally made, and so of course there's going to be some development questions and hurdles that you have to get over to get that fully made. But I mean, it could be something like, if you're a tactics game fan, which in my opinion that space is generally underserved outside of, well, Nintendo's Fire Emblem entries and the XCOM series to an extent. There aren't as many games in that space, particularly in the indie space, and I feel like that's a good spot to kind of look and see, well, maybe you've got a unique idea that you can do there. Hell, You can even look at something. You can look at a AAA offering that maybe didn't get the audience response that it might have deserved, and just kind of ape that formula, which means that you don't have to do nearly as much design work. You still need to do something to make it yours. Don't get me wrong, but you kind of ape that formula and say, here, I know there were people who bought this game. Just people didn't know about you. So, I know there were people that bought this game, and I want to service them. Or perhaps people didn't know about it. I mean, I'm, of course, referring to Valkyria Chronicles, if I'm remembering correctly. The tactics title that also had a third-person component, where when moving your characters, you were actually over their shoulder, running through the battlefield. It was very unique, particularly with the fact that it was doing kind of this World War One, World War Two, well, mostly World War. I kind of feel like it was very World War One-ish, in my opinion, approach to things, with the way that the story was presented and everything. I guess closer to World War II. There was that whole Russian approach and all that stuff, but it was a very unique little thing. Now, granted, that's a title done by AAA with Sega, and they had a very, very particular style and a very particular presentation. And so, when looking at trying to ape something like that, as a smaller company, one of the things you also need to consider is don't eat the whole cake at once. All right? Don't even try and make that whole cake. Make something to tease them with. Make a piece of the cake. Just get the basic ingredients together and package that into a little prototype or a test page. Which is something I'm doing in the comic space. I might talk about that a little bit later. But just package it into a little thing. Just enough to show this is what we could have. That's a little bit less expensive than getting all of the money together to fully develop a thing and then roll the dice on whether or not the people are actually going to see you. But this is the other part of it, too, and this is something that I fail at in particular. Because focusing on the product is very important, and if you have faith in your ability to make a good product, that's great. But the other thing is that you've got to put your stuff on blast. You've got to figure out how to get people to see you, and I know this is tough right now. With the way the algorithms are, with how hard it is to even get people to see you, and with how super saturated the space is. But like I said, obstacles are opportunities. This is something, I personally want to try and fix with, let's say, a crowdsourced review platform. Something that I would personally call decent review. Because I'd actually, in a perfect world, I'd actually do something where it's got a points system where you get cents for every good review you post and a bunch of other things when you find new stuff. But something that is more user controlled, so that we get away from one of the other issues of our current era, which is that the game reviewers are in bed with the devs, and so it's kind of this thing of where is the review real? Is it somebody responding to being jilted by a developer, or is it somebody just trying to be political about something, or do they really like the game, or do they really hate the game? Just making a solution to that. That's something I've been kicking around in my head for a while. At some point, when I actually have the funding, I might try and do it. But anyway, I've digressed in a whole bunch of different directions here, but I want to bring this back to the core point, which is in this situation where there's a lot of old blood flushed out of the companies, and they're going to they're going to eat that old blood. You have an opportunity to create a place, some new vessels, let's say, for the new blood that's coming up that needs a chance to develop their skills and needs a chance to explore this space and see if it really is something that they can do. And it's going to require a bit of buy-in because, I mean, you, who I'm talking to, probably don't have the money to start in this way. You're going to have to figure that one out. It might be that you actually ask your people to work pro bono, which is I know that's a big faux pas, particularly in the artist community. But the other option there is sweat equity, which is essentially, okay, if our work makes money, you get a percentage of the profits, and that's one way to get people to work with you. Now, that said, if you bring them on, you need to finish your product. You made a promise, you need to keep it. But that said, that's one way to do it if you don't have the money. It's basically you operate off of sweat equity. The other is, of course, loans. And if you have a good credit score, good on you. You can ask for those loans to get started. And that means that your team won't have to be part-time warriors. But it also means that you're on the hook, and you've got to make sure that your game is going to sell, or at the very least, whatever amount that you get a loan for, you have a plan to pay it back if you don't make the money. You've got to have one or the other. You either have to have absolute faith that you're going to make that money back, or you have a contingency plan that basically says, okay, in the event of failure, I can pay this off in like 12 years. That's if you get a really big loan. The other option, of course, is talking to investors and inspiring people to get on the ride. Now, this means that they're going to have a little bit of a piece of your company. They're going to have some control, and that's in that scenario, you have to ask yourself, how much are you willing to relinquish control and let your investors define things? And I should note that making poor decisions in regards to that is how AAA got to where it is now, where they've got a bunch of people who are there just for the money. And they're influencing the designs of everything else. Anyway, my point is, I don't want you to despair. I want you to be thinking when you're in that pit that has been dug, perhaps even the pit that you were ordered to dig. I'm referencing a parable, actually. Not a biblical parable, but more of a modern one. I guess I'll just tell you it. So, a general, he's got a soldier. And the soldier is there, and the general says, dig this hole. And the soldier's like, okay, boss. So he starts digging. He gets a little bit deeper. He looks back at the general, is like, is it deep enough? And the general's like, no, keep going. The hole starts getting deeper. It's about as tall as the man. It's about 6 foot. He's just dug himself a coffin. The general's like, and he looks up at the general, sir, is this deep enough? And the general's like, no, keep going. Eventually, he's added several more feet down. He can't even see the general anymore. It's like, is this deep enough? The general's like, no! He keeps digging. After a certain point, he can't hear the general anymore. He's just digging to dig. He's like, what do I do now? How do I get out of this? The walls are too steep. This could cave on me at any time. Then a rope is dropped down, and another soldier slides down in on the rope. And the guy's like, "Dude, now you're stuck in here with me. What are we going to do?" And the soldier grabs the guy by the shoulder, and he says, "Don't worry, bud. We're going to get out of this together." That's the end of the story. Now, we don't know what happened to the rope. We don't know how they got out of there. But we know one became two. And those two comforted each other, even at the bottom of that pit. And the thing is, the more people you bring on your side, the more likely it is that you're actually going to get out of there. Let's say the soldier who came down into that pit was prepared to be in that pit. He went in there specifically to get the other soldier out. We don't know what he had to do to get in there. We don't know if he was on the general's orders or not. Perhaps he had a walkie. He could call out and be like, "Okay, give me that rope, make sure we're holding it on." All that sort of thing. But the point is, industry's kind of dug itself into kind of a deep, deep pit, and it's been throwing a lot of people in there. Our best way out of this is to actually work together. So, I mean, you can solo dev all you want, And all those people who can do the AM2Rs, I envy you. You've got a lot of talent, you've got a lot of skill, but it takes you 10 years to make a game. And it's a passion project, and you didn't necessarily do it for any reason other than you wanted to make it. And, I think there's something beautiful about that. But if you really want to fix the industry, you're going to have to work with the people. You're going to have to work with the other people that need this to happen. And that's going to be tough. Believe me, I know. I've been running a game company for the last 13 years. Unprofitably, I might add. Entirely bootstrapped. I've been a part-time warrior at this for the entire time. But you have to ask yourself if it's worth that struggle. And if you're able to say yes, and you're willing to strap in, welcome, brother. I hope we can help ourselves. I hope we can help each other out of the pit. Well, that's all I have to say. Again, this is Redcoat from Vernacular Games. We have the game Highway to the Moon on Steam for 99 cents. And we're going to be working on a remake of that. Hopefully, we'll be releasing it at the end of the year. I'll try and keep you guys updated on progress with that. We're also working on a couple of other projects that aren't quite ready for, announcement. But we've got a few more things cooking. We've got a comic that we're working on. Technically two, but that one's for a client. And I won't announce that one until the client is ready. And we've got a card game, right? Rather, I guess I made it personally, but still, I've had some of my team members work on it as well. Called Overclocked. It's available on DriveThru RPG, and it's free to download. It's just the rules right now, but the theory is, what if card games were affordable? I'll let you ruminate on what that even means, but definitely check it out, download it, see if it's something that piques your fancy, and if you really like it, pay what you want. We also have a Ko-fi on Buy Me a Ko-fi, Ko-Fi. We're Vernacular Games there. And if you feel like you want to see more from us, then please become a patron on Buy Me a Ko-fi. Or perhaps become a co-financer. Anyway, also for this video, I know the standard thing, like and subscribe. Smash that like button. Explode that subscribe button. And apparently there's like a super thanks thing. I don't understand. I don't understand how any of this works. All right. I have dawdled on long enough. Play the games you want to play, boyos. This is Red Cub, signing off.